all here tonight on this wonderful, momentous occasion. And we're going to get the ball rolling, and we're going to have a good time. There are raffle tickets up in the back, and there's their quilt is up in the front. And let's just have a good time. Who's ready to have a good time?
All right, at this time, I would ask everyone to please stand and to have Nicole Vassar-Royce please come forward for the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
All right, give it up. That was amazing.
Now, if everyone can please stay standing, and we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance led by our immediate past president, Mr. Paul Salva. If you could start us off, Paul.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America.
And now if we could have retired Pastor Greg Stokes come forward for a prayer.
Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this wonderful day we can be here. And God, we think of over 100 and so history of this organization, Lord, and all that it's meant from times past to times future. All about law enforcement, protected community. And we pray tonight for our local law enforcement and public safety. We pray for the Enfield Police Department. We pray for the 5 fire districts who take care of our needs here and protect us, and for our EMS. God, we're so thankful for them. May they be blessed for this coming fall season, and may you take this food to our nourishment to our bodies. We ask in Christ's name, amen.
First of all, once again, we want to thank you for attending the 202nd annual dinner of the Enfield Society for the Detection of Thieves and Robbers. I'm Scott Copeland, I'm your Toastmaster. I'm also the treasurer of the society. Louder. All right, gotta go louder. Before I make an introduction, I want to do a couple of thanks. First of all, we want to thank the Elks Lodge 2222. They're our hosts for this evening. They help us in the overall cost of reserving this space. They're our bartenders as well, so we really want to give a big thanks to the Elks Lodge 2222. They're a great partner. The dinner from Meneely's, we think they put on a fantastic spread, so to everyone from Meneely's, thank you very much. The decorations this evening, Gil and Jan Vassar, Vassar's Landscaping, they don't expect the recognition, but thank you to Gil and his team. A beautiful rendition of the national anthem by Nicole. Nicole, thank you very much. Want to make sure you know that all of your donations for the raffles that were just presented, so anything for the teacup, anything for the 50-50, go towards our new scholarship fund. So thank you for your donations to the Scholarship Fund. And our sponsors, and they're here in the brochure. So take a look at one of the pages of the booklet, and of course patronize the sponsors who help support our community. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the first female president of the Enfield Society for the Detection of Thieves and Robbers, our president, Kim Quinn.
Welcome. As we come together to celebrate our rich history and the bonds that unite us, we continue to uphold the cherished traditions that define our society. First and foremost, the Elders cane. It remains with Bell Alimo again this year. Allow me to introduce a symbol of our unity, the bell, which you all heard moments ago. This bell is more than just an object. It is a rallying cry for our group. We ring it not only to summon our members, but also to honor the memories of those who are no longer with us. Who among us can forget the unmistakable sound of Chick Parakilis ringing that bell loud and proud, and also playing the saxophone? All right. His enthusiasm will always resonate within these walls. Tonight, we remember Pauline Brown, who died recently. Her obituary will be on Leet Stevens. I believe her burial is Monday. She was the first female member of the Thieves and Robbers. So, a moment of silence for her, that would be great. As we celebrate our past, we also embrace new traditions. This past spring, we proudly awarded our inaugural scholarship to the talented Erin Connery. Although she is away at college, we are fortunate to have her parents, Todd and Nicole, joining us this evening. If they could stand up, please. Let's extend our warmest congratulations to Erin and wish her great success in her studies. Additionally, we must also take a moment to honor those who have led our society with dedication and commitment. Please join me in giving a heartfelt round of applause to Paul Salva for his years of service. Paul, it is with great pleasure that we present you with this plaque in recognition of your unwavering commitment to our mission. Wow.
You got me. Thank you.
That's all. We'll move on to the next piece. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. Keeping in the traditions of the society, we call on a speaker that can give us advice, counsel, history on law enforcement. We feel very lucky here in the community of Enfield to have someone with a tremendous background in law enforcement, but now supporting this community in the human services. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Karen O'Connor. Karen had no applause yet, hold it for a minute. Karen had a very distinguished career with the Connecticut State Police. 26 years of service, retiring as a sergeant. Then this Enfield community was very fortunate to have Karen come here and begin to serve as the executive director of the Network Against Domestic Abuse. Karen's profession in law enforcement was polygraph. So if she calls on you to take a polygraph, make sure you're truthful. And then again, now her talents with the Network Against Domestic Abuse. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you and everyone here assembled, give a warm welcome to Karen O'Connor, Executive Director of the Network Against Domestic Abuse.
Try to take this off. Can I do this? So, hello everyone. First and foremost, I need to start with my current position here in this community. I'm not from Enfield. I spent 26 years serving as a Connecticut State Trooper, and it was primarily in the eastern part of the state. And I literally arrived in Enfield and I brought the pandemic with me and started at the network and basically came into a community that I'm completely unfamiliar with. And I need to honestly thank every single one of you for the support that you all provide to what we're doing with victims of domestic abuse here in Enfield and the surrounding towns. So I really, truly need, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for what you do and thank you for welcoming me into your community. I'm so proud to be a part of it. Thank you. So before I go any further, before I even talk about my kids, I need to thank Ed. Ed is our AV guy. I mean, he's basically the master of ceremonies, as far as I'm concerned. So thank you, Ed, for setting this all up. So I just want to talk a little bit about myself. I grew up in Tallinn, Connecticut, and these are my 3 kids, Bridget, Mick, and Jack, and everything I do is about them. And when I talk about my history and where I come from, it falls upon them. So I just can't even stand up here and talk to you about me without bringing them along with me. So, I had a fantastic career with the Connecticut State Police, retired and found, actually the network I think found me, but I was a polygraph examiner for a period of time, but we're gonna talk a little bit about how I got to that. And polygraph is actually a really unique topic. It brings up, as a matter of fact, we were talking about tacks in the shoes and all the things. There's lots of misconceptions about polygraph, and I'd like to share that with you. But what most people know about polygraph is meet the parents, that picture I have up there right now. Shortly, it's nothing like that, FYI. It's been, should I move away from this? Away from enough? So, again, the state police is what got me started with it, but I wanted to share with you the importance of it, the value of it, and I think there's ways that polygraph's being used that you may not even be aware of that actually keep our communities safe. So, how did I end up here? And this is a Karen joke, because I'm Karen. Nellie was the first Karen, but I'm the second one. How did I end up here? I'll just say, when I was invited to join this society, I was immediately just in love, and I love law enforcement. My grandfather became a Connecticut State Trooper in 1938. He had a brother that was also a state trooper, and then my father came on the state police in 1968. My grandfather actually died before, okay, I just wanted to go. My grandfather actually died before he retired in 1972. I have, my brother is actually sort of well known. His name is Brian Foley. He was Deputy Chief of Hartford Police Department. He was on Fox 61. Now he's the town manager of Tolland. I have several cousins in law enforcement on Newington, Weathersfield, and a couple other places. And of course, we have firefighters in our family as well, which makes for some really interesting weddings, just say that. So, I became a trooper, and before I did that, I was actually working for the court system, as we were talking about, and I got a master's degree in forensic science, and this was before forensic science was really cool. There was no CSI on TV. It was basically dead people. My family were like, what are you doing? Why are you getting this degree? And I became acquainted with a couple of detectives from the state police, and they said, what do you want to do? And I said, yeah, I'm really interested in going out and doing crime scenes and working with, evidence and DNA and blood and whatnot. They said, you need to be a trooper. I went home and told my dad, I think I'm going to be a trooper. My father said, no way. And I said, game on. And I became a trooper. So shortly after becoming a trooper, because I had a significant education, I very quickly went into Eastern District Major Crime and worked for about 8 years. And I thought it was all about evidence, blood, DNA, photographs, crime scenes, pattern evidence. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It was great, and we did a lot of good work. But you know what I really realized very early on as a detective is that it's not about that. The real wild card in detecting crime and solving crime is people. It's what people have to say. It's testimony, it's lies, it's who's being honest, what's real, okay? I really believe that I embraced, and I'll say this as I love that I'm here with the first female president. I really embraced my femininity in my interviewing skills, in that I wasn't beating anybody up, I wasn't shining a light on anybody. I was empathizing, and I became very, very good at talking to people, and it became kind of like my thing. Like they would send me in for the confession. And I slowly started moving away from like loving evidence and DNA, and got into talking to people and getting into people's lives and understanding what motivates them and empathizing with their situations. And so that interviewing thing became a real big deal for me. Then I started having all these babies, and I got tired of getting called out, and I was offered an opportunity to go to the academy at the Connecticut State Police Training Academy, teach criminal investigation, teach interview and interrogation to our recruits. So I did that. But I was always fascinated with talking to people, getting into someone's head, understanding where they are, understanding the psychology behind where they are. And polygraph opened up. I actually had 19 years on the job, which meant I could have retired a year later. And I applied, and I came out #1, and I was like, they're never gonna send me because I could retire in a year. I had to go to school to a national academy for 4 months in Ohio is actually where I went. And they did. They sent me, and I couldn't have been happier. So I started my polygraph career with Connecticut State Police. So, the true definition of polygraph is the psychophysiological detection of deception. That's actually truly what it is. It's not a lie detector. We like to call it a polygraph examination, and we do in the field. But really, it's the combination of what's going on psychologically with them, and also what's going on physiologically, and the marriage of the two. And we'll talk. I'm going to open up the floor for questions, because I'm sure there's going to be some, maybe, I hope, on the accuracy of it, and I hope they'll address some of that. So there are several associations associated with polygraph. There is the federal government. The federal government relies heavily upon polygraph. Anyone in here has had a family member that applied to the DEA, the FBI, Homeland Security, the feds love polygraph. And I'll be honest with you, their tests, they have their own formats that I will occasionally use. We all share formats that are approved. Their tests are hard to pass, and they're asking people to protect the president and protect the country. And there are circumstances when we're talking about federal government tests where a truthful person may actually fail a test that is being truthful, and the feds don't really care about that. They just move on to the next person, whereas the associations that I'm a member of, which is the American Polygraph Association and the American Association of Police Polygraphists, we use formats that, again, we follow strict rules on the way the questions are asked, the way the questions are formulated, the scoring techniques. They tend to be a bit easier to pass. And to be honest with you, we utilize those formats when we would polygraph someone who is, for example, being accused of a crime. We want to give them the absolute easiest test to pass, so that when we know that they don't pass, that we probably have a solid score. In addition, in Connecticut, oh, am I? Where should I stand? Over here? Sorry. In addition, some people ask, is there a licensing for polygraph examiners in the state of Connecticut? And there is not. There are some states that do require licensing and a test. Connecticut does not. However, Connecticut requires a certification, meaning in order for me to conduct tests here in the state of Connecticut, I need to submit to POST, which is the Police Officer Standards and Training Council, which basically certifies all police instructors and what law enforcement is taught, to prove that I am a valid polygraph examiner and certified polygraph examiner, and that I continue with my continuing education credits because it's continually growing, if that makes any sense. So bottom line is Connecticut is not a licensing state. There are states that are licensed. I have to be honest with you, there's some states that have nothing whatsoever. So I always like to use the term Cracker Jacks. There's a lot of Cracker Jack polygraph examiners that are flying around and have nobody keeping track of their credentials. I will say in Connecticut, for the most part, if you go onto the POST website, a certified polygraph examiner that's qualified would be listed on that website. So, let's talk about admissibility. Who thinks polygraph is admissible in court? Raise your hands. Who thinks that's not? Okay. So, in this country, there are several states that do allow polygraph to be admissible. New Mexico comes off the top of my head. In Connecticut, what is inadmissible for polygraph are two things, okay? First is a person's willingness to take it. So if law enforcement comes to someone and says, hey, do you want to take a polygraph? And they say no, that can't be held as probable cause as part of the building block. It would not be held against them, if you will. The second thing that's inadmissible is the result of the test, okay? So pass, fail, and we'll talk about the different types of results we can have. However, when it comes to law enforcement, and when I was working for the CSP and I did testing for not only police applicants but for criminal cases, everything that's discussed before, during, after, everything with the exception of the result is admissible. And I've testified to several confessions that I've obtained post-polygraph. So all of that is admissible. And actually, there is a test I'm going to share with you tonight that is admissible in every state in this country under federal rules, a polygraph test that 100% is admissible in court. So, let's talk about what makes polygraph work, but first let's talk about who invented it, because I think this is really cool. So, first of all, the detection of deception has been in existence for centuries. And it could literally go back to waterboarding in like medieval times, where they would utilize those sorts of techniques to get people to tell the truth, if you will. The first person that actually started to look at physiology, and we'll talk about autonomic physiology, which means physiology you can't control, is a person named William Marsden. And it was in the mid-20s that he actually associated specifically one channel that I'll discuss, which is your heart rate, that we see an increase in heart rate when someone is not being truthful. William Marsden is also very well known as well, and some of you, if you're involved in HR at all, anybody ever heard of the DISC personality assessment? If you're looking at your employees, you can do this test. It's called a DISC, and it's actually quite popular in the business world about how people perform. He created that DISC, and it's still used to this day. He was also kind of a perv. He loved testing women. He loved throwing I'll tell you about the pneumograph tubes. He loved testing women, and a lot of people discussed it in the field in the 20s, that he was somewhat like really kind of geared towards testing women. The other interesting thing about him is he's also the creator of Wonder Woman. He wrote the comic of Wonder Woman, and all of you know, what does Wonder Woman throw around her people? The lasso of what? Truth, right. So he created Wonder Woman, and I think that with his whole personality and his view on women might explain Wonder Woman's costume. But that being said, he was a really interesting guy, but a lot of people refer to him as the father of polygraph. And in addition to Wonder Woman and polygraph, the DISC test still is very widely used in the business corporate world today as a means of leadership and understanding your employees and their personalities. So, let's go into what happens when a person lies. So I always like to use this story, and I'll share it with you. This is a real me story. I'm going to tell you about a time I lied. Because everybody lies, right? We all lie. So I was working in polygraph, and we used to bring in 4 applicants at a time, because police applicants have to take the test to be a police officer. And we would bring them into this room and have them fill out this booklet, and one examiner would stim them. We called it stimulate them. Basically say, hey, this is how you fill out the booklet, get them all nervous, make them fill out their booklet as honestly as possible. And that was great, and then we'd give them 2 hours to fill out the booklet, and then they'd come up and we'd do the test. That's wonderful, except if it's the morning one, because that means whoever was stimming them would have to be there at 7 a.m. and let them into the building. So you'd show up and there'd be 4 guys dressed in suits, completely freaking out, right, waiting, and we'd bring them into this room. So it was my turn to stim that day. And I'm a trooper, I drive a cruiser, I live in Ashford, really far from Meriden, where I worked, and I overslept. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta get down there. And I get in my cruiser, and I'm probably exceeding the speed limit, gotta get down there. So as long as I can get there and get these guys in, no one will know I'm late. No one will know. So I'm like, okay, I get through Hartford, get down to Meriden, I pull in, and I'm like, please let them wait outside the building. Please let them be outside the building. They were not. They were not there. I walk into my office, or into the lobby, and I see the stim room door shut. And I'm standing there, and my sergeant at the time opens the door and comes out, and I'm like, hey, Sarge. I go, I'm so sorry. I came across a crash on my way coming through Hartford. Sorry, I'm late. Right? That's exactly what I said. And he goes like this. He goes, you know what, Karen, you work really hard, and I'm so happy to help you. I'm glad I was here to help you out. So as I'm walking to my office, how do you think I felt? I felt bad. I felt bad. I lied. I'm like, why did I have to lie? I feel like crap. He's such a good guy. He wasn't even mad at me. I could have told him the truth. Right? We all do this. We've all done this, right? So then I get into my desk and I sat down and I say to myself, I'm like, okay, I said I came across a crash. Did I? I didn't tell him I stopped for the crash. I didn't tell him I investigated the crash. I didn't tell him I called in the crash. I didn't tell him it was traffic. So I go quickly. I go on the intranet, on the computer, and check out Troop H, running in. Not a single crash. So now I'm thinking, how do you think I feel? You know what I feel? I feel fear. Because he could do the same thing and know I lied, right? So the normal person in this world, when they lie, they feel two emotions. They feel bad and they feel afraid. Now some would argue, before the question's even asked, what about psychopath and a sociopath? Psychopath and sociopath may not feel bad, but they're gonna feel fear, okay? And it's on a very, very, very tiny level. I have that picture of Pinocchio because we literally are taught, this is programmed that lying is bad from such a young age, right? So this happens in your body. Now let's talk about those two emotions. Those two emotions, feeling bad and feeling afraid, are huge physiology producers that you don't control. It's called your autonomic nervous system. I'll give you an example. You can feel so bad that your body cries. Do we control that physiology? We do not. Our autonomic nervous system is doing it. It's actually your sympathetic side of your autonomic nervous system. The second piece is feeling afraid. Anybody who's been looking at their cell, texting in the car, and looks up and sees brake lamps in front of them and slams on the brakes at that moment, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to rear end somebody, does your body physiologically change at that moment? 100%. You feel tingling on your skin. You feel your heart rate go up. You feel that adrenaline dump, right? You don't control that. Your body does that. And believe it or not, your body does it to keep yourself alive. Fear is a physiology producer to actually make you to be in the most beneficial place to be alive. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So the bottom line is those two emotions cause physiology. And I gave you two really big, significant examples. Crying, that's a pretty heavy duty feel bad. And that emotion of like, oh my God, I just almost got into an accident, right? But with lying, it's microscopic, it's tiny, and just like when you start to cry, eventually your body lets you stop. And just like if you're in the car and you have that moment where you're in fear, your body will eventually, you don't stay like that all day. Eventually 5 minutes later, after you pick up everything that went on the floor, when you slammed on your brakes, right, you go back to normal. So that's your parasympathetic side that comes back in and puts you back to normal. Is everyone tracking with me on this? Okay? So those two emotions occur. So in your hippocampus, which is part of your brain, you have this thing called amygdala, and that senses emotion. And the hippocampus and the amygdala are actually pretty cool. I bet you everyone in this room, all of your sensory perception has a lobe. Your eyes have a occipital lobe, your ears have the temporal lobe, taste and touch is your parietal lobe. Your sense of smell, however, is in your hippocampus with emotion. Have you ever been in a situation where you smell something and you immediately say, I know that smell. Feels good, that smell is nice. What's that smell? And then you say, oh, that's the pumpkin bread my grandma used to make. Or you smell a smell and you say, oh my gosh, that's a bad smell. I need to get away from that, right? Smell is in your hippocampus. It's actually your quickest acting sensory perception, and it's directly related to your emotion, and your emotion to trigger your memory to tell you something's bad, Okay, so that's interesting. That's part of, literally it's part of our primitive desire to stay alive. If you look at an animal in the wild, they will smell something and say, oh, that's really good, I'm going to get that. Or say, that's really bad, I'm out of here. Okay? So that's really what polygraph's all about. And interestingly enough, it's really directly tied to trauma with the work that I do with domestic violence victims. People who have experienced significant trauma will also have triggers related to sight, smell, and things of that nature. So it falls into that same realm of keep yourself alive. Okay. So when your body senses that emotion of fear specifically, it will, the hippocampus will talk to the pituitary gland and start to dump hormones. Those hormones are meant to keep you alive. You've all heard of stories where someone can pick something up, superhuman strength, pick up a car. Or stories where someone's arm's hanging off and they're talking and they feel no pain, right? So your body does that to keep yourself alive. It will force your blood towards your core, where your vital organs are, where you hear that expression, he was pale as a ghost, right? So blood moves towards your core, and I promise all this science is going to make sense, hopefully in a couple minutes. You also have that sweat activity on your skin that causes your hair to raise, hence your expression, I have goosebumps, the hair on the back of my neck is standing up, or someone tells a story and you say, oh my God, I just got like a ghost story, and someone goes, I just got a chill. You're basically sweating. You don't feel the sweat, but what you feel is that sweat drying in your skin, and that's that sweat response that you have with fear. And if you tie it back to when we perhaps could have been more primitive people, what happens with an animal when they're in fear in the wild? What happens with their hair? Comes up, okay? So these are all reactions that your body takes to keep yourself alive, specifically related to fear. So before we get into what we're measuring and why it works, let me just throw this out to you. So the average person, we're going to talk about how accurate can one be when telling if someone's lying. My kids hate what I do. They hate it. Like, I literally can look at all of them and I'm like, no, I'll ask a question and go, it's you. And I know exactly who's lying, right? So the average person, the FBI has done studies on this specifically. What someone throw out in, 50% of the time, 60% of the time, how often do you think the average person is good at telling if someone's being truthful or lying? What do you think? Somebody lower than that? It's higher than that. The average person just looking at somebody going, I think that person's lying. I think that person's truthful. You're actually the closest. It's 51%. 51% of the time, the average person can basically get it right that someone's telling the truth or lying. What is that to me? Slightly better than a coin toss, right? So someone like me, I've been through years of doing polygraph, years of getting confirmation of whether or not what I thought was what I saw, and if deception was true deception. Someone who's highly trained, like an FBI agent that does polygraph, someone who's interviewing all the time, someone who's done classes and classes over what to recognize. How accurate do you think they are? Someone who's highly trained. Throw a number out. What did I hear? Somebody said 70? Anybody else? Higher 70, lower 70? Okay. I'm gonna stop us. It's 65% of the time, someone who's highly trained is right. As far as I'm concerned, that's slightly better than a coin toss. You got a see, and I got a chance. All right, so my point is that it is literally slightly better than a coin toss, no matter how skilled you are. So let's talk about the accuracy of polygraph. Would you like to go there? So there's a couple different kinds of tests we're going to get into, but I'm going to break it up into two. One would be what we call a specific issue. So my question would be, did you rob that store? Did you rob that store last week? Maybe do you know where that money is right now? That's one issue. We'll all agree it's one issue. We could do be creative in those questions, but the bottom line is we're dealing with one issue. Okay? Depending, the APA, the American Polygraph Association, does meta-analysis. They constantly test the formats. Depending on the format that we use, and believe it or not, our best and most accurate format is a federal test. it has it up to 95% accurate, okay, on that meta-analysis for a specific issue. Now, if I'm testing a police applicant, I'm asking a whole bunch of questions. I'm asking about their criminal history. I'm asking about their drug use. I'm asking about their use of alcohol. I'm asking about their employment history. So I'm adding a bunch of other layers into the test. And with those tests, depending on the format we use, it ends up being anywhere from 80 to 85%, okay? What does this mean? You know what this means? Polygraph is 100% imperfect. It is not perfect, which is why a lot of states will not accept the test as valid, because we can't get it to a certainty, whereas if we've used theory of probability, a scientific principle, we could get that. However, it is a hell of a tool, and it really works, okay? So I wanted to just address that accuracy of it, and when I do tests, specifically with my candidates or applicants, I will tell them straight up, it's not perfect. We're gonna do our best we can to get it to where we can get it. Okay, so I want to tell a couple of stories about, like, I think I'm pretty good. I went through like years and years of being like let's send Karen in. Karen will close it. Karen will get the confession. Well, I thought I was pretty darn good, and I thought I was really good at knowing when people are lying, looking at deceptive behavior. And really it's like, you could probably read studies where they talk about look to the right, look to the left, all BS. I like to listen. Like if someone says, hey, I really feel like I was pretty truthful, like that statement in and of itself is not truthful. You're pretty truthful. Like I listen to those little nuances. But polygraph has beaten me over and over again, where I pretty much think I know. And I'll just say on the deceptive side, it's easy. I could be sitting with someone and I'm like, this person's acting truthful. They're 100% behaving in a truthful manner. Their responses are really truthful. And then they end up blowing up the test, and then I'd get a confession. And I'd literally walk out going, oh my God. And again, as an examiner, regardless of my feelings, I'm told to go with my results. You go with your data, and even if you don't feel right about it, you go with it. And I've done that, and I've gotten confessions when I was a police officer, right? But I want to share a story of one time where it tricked me with being truthful, because I think we don't have these circumstances. So I was working on a case with the state police. It was actually an Eastern Connecticut PD. We had a baby that was injured. Mom worked at a coffee shop. Boyfriend was watching the baby in the car. Baby ended up being really had some significant injuries, where mom took the baby to the hospital. They did some research. The boyfriend would come to the donut shop and sit in the car with the baby, and then mom would come out on breaks and see the baby. Boyfriend said, yeah, baby's really acting colicky, and I couldn't get them in the seat. And I looked at all the interviews. I watched the PD's interviews of him showing how he put the baby in the car seat. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, I like getting confessions when I was a cop. I would go home, that was a win. If I got a confession, I got someone to tell me what they were supposed to tell me, then I felt like it was a win. So I always wanted the person that I thought was gonna be the confession for me at the end of the day. So we said, hey, let's bring mom and the baby and the boyfriend in. And I'm looking through all the paperwork, looking at the interviews with the boyfriend, and I said, I want the boyfriend. I'm going to test him. He's going to fail, and I'm going to get a confession. Okay? I went into it with that, with my law enforcement eyes on the case, and went into that polygraph like that. As a polygraph examiner, your job, you're ethically bound to do everything you possibly can do to get the truthful person to pass. It's not about failing. The big win is to get the truthful person to pass. So I brought this guy in, and I did all that I needed to do and worked hard to get that person into a psychological set where I felt like he was ready to take the test, to get him to pass, even though I'm human in my mind, he was going to fail, and I was going to get the confession. But I still did my job, right? I'm still human, and I still had feelings. So I start running the test, and sure enough, I run the first chart, and his charts were coming out truthful, right out the box. And usually the best chart's going to be, as far as the most reactions, going to be the first chart. And I was scratching my head, and I'm like, this is not what I expected. And I got out I let him take a rest in between charts. I went out into the hallway, and I'm like, I wonder what if I did, I'm really surprised that this is happening. And my partner, who had brought mom in for a test, came out of his suite, and I said, hey, I don't understand. I said, this guy's got really good charts. And he turned to me and he said, oh yeah? He goes, Mom just blew it up and she's confessing she was involved in the injuries of this baby. So I feel like really, I'd like to tell this story because I think it's a rare story where I can actually say that I thought someone was being deceptive and it beat me, the physiology beat me. And I'm actually proud of myself that I did my job and didn't shortchange it and did everything the way I was supposed to get that person to pass. So let's talk for a minute about the channels that we have. So this particular picture doesn't give all of the channels. So first and foremost, there are 3 channels that we look at. First and foremost, if your body's going to start dumping cortisol, adrenaline, and all kinds of hormones to allow you to survive a fearful situation, on a polygraph level, you'd never feel it and not even know it was occurring. We see an increase in the heart rate, okay? Now, with any autonomic response, we need to see it happen, and we also need to see it go away. So just like if you're in the car and you slam on the brakes, you're not going to stay like that all day. You have to come back down. In polygraph, it's seconds where I see the heart rate go up, and I need, on the sympathetic side, and I need to see it go back down on the parasympathetic side, okay? So we see a heart rate. So we run a cuff on the arm and run a sustained heart rate. It's a blood pressure cuff, but we're running their heart rate. The second thing is sweat activity on the skin. We've already talked about that you have a sweat response, regardless of whatever primitive means that played in keeping us alive, it still occurs. And there's 2 plates on those fingers, and anyone that can't see, I'm sorry. So those 2 plates are basically sending a signal from charge to charge on the skin. You don't feel it. It follows the path of least resistance, going back and forth, playing catch like with a ball. If you sweat a little bit, what happens with electricity and sweat? What does it do? It makes it go faster. So we see that game of ball speed up. And again, we need to see it stop. So it's true autonomic. What's missing is that middle finger with nothing on it, because it's a brand new channel as of 2013, is blood volume. So we know that when people experience the true autonomic response to fear, that we see their blood pool towards their core, which is where their vital organs are, their hearts, lungs, and you've seen that, where you see someone's like white as a ghost. It's because their blood is going towards their core. That's where the vital organs need that blood supply. So what we'll see with the plethysmograph, it looks like a pulse oximeter, but it's an ultraviolet light that shines in the fingertip, and it will basically, if you're going to see blood volume changes, the places you're going to see it are the head, the fingertips, and the toes. So we monitor blood volume changes in the fingertips, okay? So let's talk for a minute about nervousness. People ask me all the time, does nervousness affect the polygraph? Do you guys have that question too? I'm going to say one thing right now. I wish I could write a book on this. If nervousness affected a polygraph, no one would ever pass. There would be no cops in the state of Connecticut, okay? Because it is required to take a polygraph if you're a police officer. Nervousness is not a true emotion that causes autonomic responses. Nervousness is a state, and believe it or not, it's a state that we control. We can make it happen and we can make it go away. It's not easy. It's not an emotion that's triggered in the hippocampus, okay? So nervousness to me in a polygraph is static and does not affect it. There's also a couple of tubes that go around the core, the torso. A lot of people think it has to do with breathing, and it does to some degree, but it's really about, for me, I utilize those. If I'm asking you a question and in that 3-second moment that I need a reaction, you burp, you swallow. You know, you could, I don't know, clear your throat. I can see that with those tubes. It monitors every aspect of respiration, so it allows us to see the movements. And we have movement sensors everywhere. Movement sensors under your feet, movement sensors on your seat. I can see if you fart. It legit is that strong, okay? We don't need to take shoes off. Movement sensors on your arms, and then you've got the torso sensors. So this whole thumbtack in the shoe could never possibly happen. Could never possibly happen without us knowing. And I always say, listen, if you're going to do something stupid in a polygraph, you just look like a liar and a cheater. So go for it if that's what you're going to do. So let's talk about any questions on the physiology piece of it, because I kind of give you Reader's Digest. It's pretty interesting, right? Go ahead. Hi. So that's a really good question. Obviously, ethically, if I felt somebody was intoxicated or not in their right mind, I would not test them. We do a full medical, like biodemographical questionnaire, and we do a lot. Polygraph involves a lot of talking. Literally, polygraph test is about 15 minutes. The work is really in the pre-test part of it, where we're talking to them about what they're being tested about. And also, I want to make sure that I have someone in the mental state to pass. We call it a psychological set, meaning I am not going to test you. If you're so freaked out, I'm not going to test you. I'm not going to test you until you're not freaked out, right? And I'm going to get you into that mental state where you can pass. Again, my goal is to get you to pass. So, great question. So I would walk away from that. Sometimes, honestly, some people, we've done tests where people have substance abuse issues. We tell them not to change anything. Like if you're the kind of person that needs a glass of wine before you go to work every day, if you're coming into polygraph, then have a glass of wine. I'm not testing someone who's intoxicated, but you understand, like we want them in their most normal state. Good question. Any other questions about physiology? Yes. Pardon me? So I can tell you I have attention deficit. I would honestly say that I can't test somebody until I feel they're ready. And I have had circumstances in my career where I've said, listen, I'm not going to test you today. For the most part, we have this pre-test format where we get them to a state where they're going to pay attention. The other thing is to pass polygraph, you have to be able to pay attention, you have to be able to follow instructions. If someone is unable to follow instructions or to pay attention to the point where I can't score them, then we would call that an inconclusive, and I'm going to get to that in a minute because we do have inconclusive results, okay? Like where the data is atypical. Okay. So let's talk about what polygraph is used for in Connecticut. So police applicant, it's required that any police officer with the state of Connecticut needs to have a successful polygraph within 6 months of hire. So if someone's in the process and they take it and then a year goes by, they still have to take another test. It's got to be within 6 months of hire. Those are screening. Those are done by private and sworn. And I'll just share with you that I did start my own business, and most of my clients are police departments, and I do applicant testing. So private and police departments also test for those. Specific issue is what I've already mentioned. Did you rob the store? A police department would use that as part of a criminal case. As a private examiner, I would probably do that for a defense attorney who wants their client tested to see if they're telling the truth. And as a private, if their client fails, no one will ever know that they ever took the test with me. The next one is statement confirming. So sometimes we're away from a specific issue, but a person, and state's attorneys actually love this test. Person's giving a whole series of events that they said was true. So we've got lots of things we want to test. So instead of testing a specific issue or going to multi-issues, we'll basically go through their whole statement and say, is everything that you've told us truthful, or are you being untruthful in any part of this statement? It's kind of call the whole statement in. Pre-trial stipulation, sometimes state's attorneys will say, hey, listen, if you test this guy and he's telling the truth at this part, we're going to make some kind of plea bargain deal around, used all the time by state's attorneys in this state. So Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So this is called tactical polygraph. It is used in the state, and it is actually highly contested in the polygraph community as if this is okay. So what this is if the Internet Crimes Against Children Federal Bureau, basically that software that's running all the time to know if you're looking at child porn, will basically key in on that, call State Police Computer Crimes and say, hey, we've got somebody accessing child pornography at this residence. They'll do an ex parte and watch their computer activity for about a month. And then at the end of that month, they'll either write a warrant and go in and take it, or they'll do what they call a knock and announce, knock on the door and say, hey, we want to come in and talk to you about what you're looking at on the computer. They'll set up a polygraph examiner to be on standby to basically say, hey, just because you have child pornography doesn't mean that you've offended. Let's go take a test to that right now and clear that issue. Lots of contention about whether or not that person is in a state to pass. Very highly discussed in the polygraph community. It has been done here in Connecticut. Concealed information tests, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Searching which concealed information is 100% admissible in every state in this country as a test. And search and peak attention is also used by police. So there's also post-convicted sex offender testing that is occurring right now here in the state of Connecticut. The state contracts a company that works with probation. If someone is convicted of a sex crime, as part of their probation, they will attend either biannual or quarterly polygraph tests about whether or not they are following the guidelines, like maybe they can't be near a school, they can't access child pornography, they can't be around children. They will bring them in and test them to that, but it is not punitive. It's purely if they fail, it gets reported to their probation officer, and then it's dealt with therapeutically. But it's a very effective method of monitoring offenders that are out there. And interestingly enough, because it's the marriage of my two worlds, is certain states like Ohio are using the same format for serious domestic violence offenders, testing them on abusive and controlling behavior and violence. So that's happening in other states. Fidelity testing. So I'm now a private examiner. I do not do these, but I do have someone that will do them. But basically, we have two people that come forward and say, hey, we want to make sure that the other one's not cheating. And they'll do a test. Believe it or not, these are very, very popular to be asked for. And then lastly, fishing tournaments and also bodybuilding competitions, only done by private examiners. I do not participate in that, but those are a big part of fishing tournaments. So I'm getting near the end, guys. So there's 3 potential outcomes for a specific issue. It would be deception indicated, no deception indicated, or inconclusive. Our scoring does allow a generous area of saying, hey, we're not going to make a call, it's too close to call. For when we're talking about applicants and screening, it changes to significant response, no significant response, or inconclusive. And I'll just add, remember I said it was a little bit lower of accuracy if it's a screening? 9 times out of 10, they're lying in one area, we just may not be able to call the exact area, right? Maybe paying up in another area when really they're lying in another area. Okay, so we have those portable units that we go out, but hold on, let's talk about concealed information really quick, because this is the only test that is admissible under federal rules of evidence. And the reason why it is because it's based on the theory of probability, and this would be a law enforcement utilized test to solve a crime. So we have a crime, police have certain information that is not available to the public, and what they'll do, and I'm going to go by, it's a test of recognition, okay? It's not about lying, it's about are they recognizing something. So basically we set up keys, and we can actually get this test to 100% accurate based on theory of probability. So keys are crucial pieces of information like a weapon use, specific actions, point of entry, memory item stolen, locations. So if you think about this, we're going to go right to where we do the keys. So let's just say the key is a bat that's used in this crime. The polygraph examiner says, you know, if you were involved in this incident, you would know the weapon used. Please repeat the following words after me. And they'll say knife, they'll repeat it. And the bottom line is if we see out of 3 asks, they keep hitting on the actual item, understand it's a test of recognition. The more keys you add, the more accurate it becomes. And I think I actually have and there's a scoring technique we use, but it will bring you either to almost to 100%, we can get to 100%, or the probability of no involvement. And here's an example of based on the number of keys and the scoring, we can get it to 100% accurate. And the reason why this test is admissible is because it follows the scientific principle of probability, which is an accurate and validated scientific principle. So let me just give you an example, okay? So concealed information test scheduled for a suspect in a homicide. The investigation has revealed that the killer cut the phone line, kicked in the back door of the residence, bludgeoned the victim with a crowbar as she slept in her bed, and exited the residence via unlocking the front door. So what would we do? We'd talk about keys. We've got all kinds of keys here. The kicked in door, where they were killed, what was done before they entered, right? And again, all of this can't be available to the public, so we always talk about how law enforcement doesn't like to be transparent and doesn't like to put information out. Part of it is because of stuff like this. Like, we need information and facts that the public doesn't know so that when people come forward, they actually know it's accurate information, right? So, for example, we would choose a key of, if you were the person that broke in the house, you know it was entered, repeat after me the following areas of entry. And obviously in this one, the back door would be the area. Now, this is asked several times and in different orders, do the math. If the person is hitting on that back door over and over again, that's pretty crazy, right? That means that they recognize that. Then you start adding keys. The person broke in the house that last night, you did something on the property just before you entered the house. Repeat after me. Broke a window, cut the phone line, tied up a dog, climbed a fence. If they're hitting on that, cut the phone line over and over again, the more keys you have, the more accurate we get, the more we can get to 100%. Okay? And continue going on through different keys. So that is an admissible, supported by science, polygraph test in this country. So I want to just bring up one more piece. It's called Searching Peak of Tension. And actually, I was really excited because I was having the opportunity to do this test. Not excited about the homicide. There was a homicide in Easton, Connecticut. There was a mom and dad missing. And people might remember that, where they suspected the son. And they wanted me to do a test on the son about, like, listen, you don't know where your parents are. Let's do this test and clear it. We may also do this test, like, say there's a missing child. They may bring the parents in and say, let's just do this searching peak attention test to deal with whether or not you know where your child is, okay? And it's used quite a bit. So this is also a test of recognition. And what you would do is you would basically create a map and sit them down and say, you know, regarding the location of that woman's body, and they throw buffers in, Denver, Chicago, Area A, Area B, Area C. They do that over and over again. If they keep hitting on a certain, and it's Area 1, 2, 3, 4, that's my fault on the PowerPoint, it should be 86. But if they keep hitting on 3, then they say, okay, we got a hit on 3. Let's move into 3. And then I'll take 3, Area 3, and start making it Area A, B, C, D, and they keep moving in and moving in. Again, it has to be something there. There has to be a significant recognition of a particular area to keep moving in. And then it can go into actually, you know, is it near the railroad tracks? Is it near, you can really hone it in. It's a continual test that keeps honing in. So, just showing you a few cool tests that are out there. I just want to say I'm really grateful to come up here and talk to you about this. Polygraph is a little side thing for me. It's like a hobby and a love of mine that I carried over from my law enforcement life. I love being a part of the future of law enforcement and the application part of it, and basically dealing with applicants and telling them that what they've done is not nearly as important as their willingness to be honest with the agencies that are going to hire them. And I have a really good pass rate, which I'm super proud of. But that's what I do now for fun.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And we would like to thank all of you, the committee members, the committee of arrangement members, prudential committee members, pursuers. If you're here, let's hear from you. Pursuers. Woo! All right. Thank you for being here tonight and for your continued support and for your commitment to our society. Let's raise a glass to the past, present, and future of the society for the detection of thieves and robbers. Have a wonderful evening.